Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. We're now into the final week of reporting season, and it's going to be a very big week indeed. BHP, Woolies, Coles, Fortescue, Wesfarmers, Qantas, Flight Centre, just to name a few. They're announcing over the next 5 days, but there have been some terrific stories out of reporting season already. A few surprises, plenty of winners, and of course, plenty of losers. Remember, this is general information only, and you should seek professional advice before making investment decisions. Roger Montgomery is the founder and chief investment officer at Montgomery Investment Management. Roger, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Great to be with you, Sean.
Is this your busiest time of year, Roger?
It is for all fund managers. And that's because there are so many companies reporting. And I guess two things happen during reporting season. Number one, analysts want to know whether or not they need to change their perception of a company and how it's going. And probably the most important thing is the outlook statements, and that leads to upgrades and downgrades to forecasts for the following year. So those two things are really important. The other thing to remember is that there's all sorts of measurement issues now with macroeconomic measures. You've got seasonality, structural changes, makes it really, really hard to know how the economy is actually going. And so more and more now, when companies themselves report, they're proving to be the best gauges on various trends in the broader economy. So, I think this time of year and also February, when companies report their half-year results, or the bulk of them are reporting half-year results, that gives us a lot of insight, not only into those individual companies, but into the economy more generally.
Okay, so we'll jump into some specific companies in a moment, but broadly, what do you make of profit season so far?
Well, we're seeing on the revenue level, there's probably just as many companies that are meeting expectations as those that are missing expectations. But when you actually look down at results, at their profit results, for example, that there are more companies beating than missing at the EBIT line as well as on dividend payments. And then in terms of outlooks, positive earnings surprises are slightly beating the negative outlook surprises. I think one of the major takeaways at the moment is that the interest rates have what appear to be topped out, but the expectation is that they might be cut. However, they're staying higher for longer at the moment, so those cuts might not come through for a while, and that's affecting a bunch of companies. For example, if you take the banks by way of example, it's been very good for them on the net interest margin side, the stability in rates, that's really helped them. But we're seeing a spike in non-performing loans now. And that may lead to bad debts down the track, but we'll have to wait and see. And then I guess, the other thing that we're seeing in terms of the impact from rates is that we're seeing more turnover of assets. So the number of houses being listed for sales gone up. That was reported by both REA Group and Domain. And we also know that car sales, they're telling a similar story. We're seeing elevated interest rates persuading dealers to move their inventory a lot faster, and they're discounting in order to achieve that. And that's all because interest rates are staying higher for longer. And then probably one of the more painful share price reactions was to Origin's result a couple of weeks ago. And, the cost of living pressures are really affecting their ability to meet cost reduction targets. They're not able to do that because people are suffering so much.
What about consumer discretionary? There's been some interesting results, and I know we'll probably talk about Breville in a moment, but there's certainly in cost inflation going on in a bunch of those companies, and some of them have been slightly disappointing, but there's also been a few that have come out and said, well, the first trading in July, or the last 6 or 7 weeks, has actually been pretty good. And I wonder whether that's got much to do with the July 1 tax cuts, or consumer discretionary seems to be very mixed.
Yeah, look, the companies that we tend to follow, we're tending to follow high quality businesses generally. So the companies that we're seeing, or that we watch and that we take particular interest in, they've done reasonably well, but that's not because the consumer, that's not related necessarily to the consumer directly. Yeah. So if you look at the four-wheel drive aftermarket parts and accessories business, ARB, that business grew its revenue by just over 3%, which, isn't particularly exciting. But what's probably more exciting is that their OEM revenue, so their original equipment manufacturing deals that they've done with Ford and with Toyota in the United States, where a lot of their future growth is going to come from, that jumped about 40%. It's only a small component of the business at the moment, but that excited investors. So that's a classic example of a business that the narrative has really always been the cyclicality of its domestic business. So when times are good, people are spending money on blinging their four-wheel drives. When times are tough, they don't. And the business has really been tied for a long time. Its valuation and its story has been tied to that cyclical domestic element. But as it grows its overseas business, what we'll find is that that will become less important. And I mentioned REA a moment ago. That's another example where there's a cyclical component to its story in terms of listings. Remember, its business revenue isn't directly related to house prices. What it's related to is the number of houses being listed for sale, because it gets advertising revenue for those houses being listed. But its revenue story is really not defined by the last 10 years declines in overall listings. Its story is related to the fact that it is the dominant portal in Australia. And even though it charges the most, it has the most houses available for sale listed. And it keeps increasing its price for its existing tiers of advertising, and it always adds more expensive tiers. So, it had a standard tier many years ago, and then it had something called a featured tier. But since then, it's added Premier All, Premier Plus, and now it's going with a tier called Luxe for
Right.
more expensive homes. So, and it'll charge more for all of those. So again, there's two stories. By the way, I would rank REA and ARB as in the top 10 companies in Australia in terms of quality. And they've got a nuanced story that's unrelated to the consumer discretionary space.
Stay with me, Roger. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to Roger Montgomery from Montgomery Investment Management. Okay, let's talk about Breville then. And this is probably more relatable to ARB, because their top line, their revenue growth seems to be very strong. And they're a local company who have done a really good job overseas.
Yeah, for a long time, people misunderstood that business. They don't have any retail stores of their own. They don't have any manufacturing of their own. They're a design company. And they leave the distribution to others. They leave the manufacturing to others. So they're really a brand, and their great story. And by the way, they're also an example of a company that demonstrates why companies shouldn't listen to analysts. Back in February, I'll just tell you, just by way of background, back in Feb, when they reported their half-year results, there were analysts who were saying, we're a bit disappointed with their sales because they should have discounted their product. They should have done more promotions, and that would have helped their top line. And what's actually happened now is their top line has grown and their margin has gone up dramatically as well. So don't listen to analysts who have never run a business. But the story for Breville, what's exciting about that particular business is that a lot of their growth is going to come now from coffee machines in the United States. Now, you might think, oh, big deal. Why? Sure, it's a big market. But America is way, way behind Australia in terms of bringing that barista coffee experience home and making your own really nice cappuccino at home or double espresso or double macchiato, whatever it is that you like. America's a long way behind doing that. They've really just got onto the barista coffee thing in the last decade, and they haven't really thought about bringing that home. Now, Breville is exciting because it's dominating potentially with a premium product that market of bringing that barista experience home. So that's what's exciting about that one.
We're almost out of time, but we've got to ask you about one of the big companies. And I know you've been watching CSL, which is a really interesting company because there's lots of debate whether that's going through a re-rating period or not. What do you make of the blood plasma group?
Yeah, look, the story there is, there was 11% rise in sales, which is great, and everyone looks at that. I think that the most important story, though, there again is in the United States, where blood plasma collections went back to normal levels post-COVID, and so in fact the increase in sales, 70% of that increase really just came from their bearing segment, which is the immunoglobulin derived blood plasma products, and the ramp up in collections really was the major contributor to the growth in sales there.
Okay, this week, what are you looking out for? What are you wanting to see?
Oh, well, here's the interesting thing. So far, and I'll speak broadly, so far what we've seen is not even half the companies report, but because it's the bigger companies that tend to report at the start of reporting season, more than half of the market cap has reported. But what we're going to see now is a larger number of companies reporting. And remember, right at the start of our chat today, I was saying that, these company results really give us a good insight into the economy. Well, because we're going to have a larger number of companies reporting in the second part in these last 2 weeks or thereabouts, we're going to get some more insights into the economy and how it's tracking with interest rates being elevated for much longer than everyone had hoped.
Roger, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Always a pleasure, Sean. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
That was Roger Montgomery, founder and chief investment officer at Montgomery Investment Management. This is the Fear and Greed business interview. Remember, this is general information only, and you should seek professional advice before making investment decisions. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.